Hey everyone! Before we dive into one of the most disturbing and mysterious stories you've ever heard, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel, and I promise you don't want to miss a single detail of what I'm about to tell you. Now, you've probably heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident. 9 hikers, a cut-open tent, strange injuries, radiation, and no survivors to explain what happened. It's been called the most haunting mystery in the history of mountain trekking. But what if I told you there's another story, almost completely unknown to the Western world, that is even stranger, even more terrifying, and even harder to explain? A story where something unspeakable happened high in the mountains of southern Siberia. A story where 6 experienced hikers lost their minds. One by one, they fell to the ground foaming at the mouth. They beat their heads against rocks. They bit each other. And when it was over, only one person was left alive. A 16-year-old girl who spent 4 days alone in the wilderness, walking next to corpses, before she finally stumbled out of the forest. This is the story of the Korovina group. And believe me, it is worse than Dyatlov. Much worse. The year is 1993. The place, the Hamar Daban mountain range, in the Republic of Buryatia, southern Siberia. The leader of the expedition is a woman named Ludmila Korovina. She is 41 years old, the head of a hiking club called Azimuth at a vocational school in Petropavlovsk, in modern-day Kazakhstan. She is known as one of the best trekking group leaders in the entire city. Her former students remember her as someone who could unite people, who believed in them, who brought out the best in everyone. One of them said, "We were all like foster children to her." She was a professional hiker of international level. She had led expeditions through the Tian Shan Mountains, the Urals, the Altai, the Karakum Desert. And this was not her first time on Hamar Daban. So who joined her on this fatal hike? Let me introduce you to the people who would never come back. Except one. First, there is Alexander Kristin. He's 23 years old, a student at the Bauman Technical University in Moscow. He joined Korovina's club when he was just 12. And he had dreamed of the mountains ever since. Right after his university exams, he headed for Hamar Daban. He was the strongest member of the whole group, the backbone of the team. Then Denis Shvachkin. He is 19. He ended up in the group almost by accident. He was also a member of Korovina's club, but only joined this particular trek because another member's parents said no. His own parents were away on vacation, so he left them a note, "We'll be back soon." He never saw them again. Timur Bapanov, only 15 years old, grew up in the mountains because his parents loved sports tourism and passed that passion to their son. Tatiana Filipenko. She is 24, works as a secretary at the school that housed the hiking club. She had been on several easier hikes with Korovina and was excited to finally attempt a real ascent. Viktoria Selisova. She is 16. She was not originally supposed to be part of the group. She had struggled on a winter hike before, and Korovina didn't want to take her. But Victoria was adamant, so she asked her mother to call Korovina and persuade her. And it worked. Valentina Utachenko, also 16. She grew up in a village used to hard, dirty work. She had remarkable physical and mental strength. She wanted to experience the romance of the Hamar Daban range. And she is the one who survived. And finally, the leader herself, Ludmila Korovina. So, 7 people in total. 3 young men, 3 young women, and their beloved teacher. They are all experienced. They are all passionate. They spent 6 months preparing for this ascent. Every detail of the route, every hour of the hike was elaborated. The plan is to cover between 130 and 140 miles, over 200 kilometers. The route starts at a small settlement called Murino, goes through the Langutaisky Pass along a ridge to the summit of Kanula, then down to the Sneznaya River, past a lake, a village, another lake, and finally ends at the city of Sludyanka. The difficulty rating? Level 3. That's medium difficulty. Beginners are warned against it, but for a group like this, it should be challenging but doable. The highest point on the route is Mount Khan Ula, at 7,778 feet. That is not considered dangerously high. The human body can usually adapt. But there is a catch. Altitude sickness can sometimes set in as low as 6,500 feet, with symptoms like deteriorating vision, reduced light sensitivity, and messed up spatial perception. But the altitude is not the real problem here. The problem is everything else. because the summer of 1993 is not normal. Meteorologists will later say that June and August of that year saw the worst weather in the region in 30 years. Heavy rain, snow, strong winds. And the mountains of Hamar Daban are already a strange place. Locals and shamans believe that Hamar Daban is a place of mysterious force. Shamans forbid anyone but themselves to visit certain areas of the ridge, where they perform rituals and enter trance states. Travelers often report being overwhelmed by inexplicable sensations: fear, anxiety, despair, complete apathy. Some hear a constant rumble that seems to come from nowhere. Others hear strange creaking and squeaking. Some see uncanny landscapes and oddly behaving animals. And that summer, the animals are behaving very oddly indeed. Deer that are not afraid of people. They don't run away. They just freeze and stare. Bears walking onto railroad tracks and throwing themselves under trains. And the trees, in some places, it looks as if some mysterious force has pressed them flat against the slopes. You have to cut your way through with an axe. This is where Korovina's team is heading. They start their hike on August 2nd. They take a commemorative photo at Murino Station. Then they set off into the mountains. The first days are tough. They go through the Langutaisky Pass, reach the crest of Hamar Daban, and head for the summit of Khan Ula. But the weather is against them from the beginning. It is the height of summer, but there is heavy rain, snow, and strong winds. They are not prepared for this. The forecast was completely different when they were planning the hike. On top of the downpour, they have to endure an impenetrable fog. Later, another trekking group will describe it as sticky fog. No one can really define what sticky fog means. It seems that you can only experience it, not describe it. Out of all the days of their hike, only one day is sunny. That day, they make camp at the Langutaisky Pass and take a rest. But the next morning, as they move along the crest, the weather gets worse again. On August 4th, they reach the summit of Khan Ula. They set up an overnight camp. The land is barren, windy, nothing but rocks and grass. The bad weather makes everything miserable. Their plan is to climb another, lower mountain the next day, then descend to the Snezhnaya River. There, a second hiking group, which includes Korovina's own daughter, 16-year-old Natalia, will be waiting for them. Together, they will go to the city of Sludyanka. But Korovina's team never reaches the meeting place. Natalia waits the first day, then the second. Her group decides to continue alone. She only learns the terrible news at the end of her own hike, when she finds out that one member of her mother's group has been found, a young woman picked up by Ukrainian hikers on the banks of the Snezhnaya River. That young woman is Valentina Utachenko. She is in a state of shock. She can barely speak, but she manages to say enough. Her whole group died on the 5th day of the hike. The rescuers are sent out immediately. An official investigation is launched, and Valentina is asked to write an explanatory note. What she writes is chilling. Here is what she said, and I'm paraphrasing from the original document. On August 4th, we reached the pass. We went down and hiked through a treeless alpine zone. We cooked on a camp stove. Around 4 p.m., we were moving towards a peak, but it was cold and raining heavily, so we stopped in a treeless area and set up 2 tents. At 4 a.m., our guy ropes tore, we changed them. At 6 a.m., one of the tent poles was torn from the ground. Sleeping bags got wet. Then August 5th, 10 a.m., Alexander Kristin came and said they were soaking wet and freezing. It was snowing. No landmarks were visible. We collected our backpacks and started to go. After about 10 meters, Alexander fell. Others tried to help him, but he kept falling. Korovina stayed beside him and told the others to go down. But then she stopped us almost immediately and asked someone to return to her. Tatiana took out a tent, and the others took cover while I went up to Korovina. Alexander's eyes were huge and indifferent. Korovina took his pulse and said his heart had stopped beating. She asked me to help Victoria, so I went up to her, but Victoria bit me. I dragged her back to the rest. Then Tatiana began banging her head on the rocks. Dennis hid behind them and climbed into his sleeping bag. I crawled up to Korovina, but she wasn't breathing. Then I tried getting Timur up. When I realized that no one was moving, I went down to where there were trees. I got dressed, got into my sleeping bag, covered myself with a tent. In the morning, I went back up and saw Tatiana, Dennis, Timur, and Victoria. Above them were Alexander and Korovina. None of them rose again. Let that sink in. A 16-year-old girl watches her friends die one by one. A strong young man falls, foaming at the mouth. The leader, the experienced international-level leader, dies sitting next to him. A girl bites her. Another bangs her head on rocks until she collapses. A boy hides and climbs into his sleeping bag like a child trying to disappear. And then nothing. Silence. Valentina says she spent 3 more days alone in the mountains. She closed the eyes of the dead. She somehow found an abandoned transmission tower and followed the power lines, reaching a deserted village and then the riverbank where she collapsed. She was discovered by hikers from Kiev, who gave her medicine and antibiotics for severe hypothermia. The search for the rest of the team continues for months. Their bodies are found only in early September. The slope is a horrifying sight. Almost all the victims are dressed in thin trousers. 3 are barefoot. After a month in the open air, in an area full of animals, the bodies are horribly disfigured. Rescuers later say it was difficult to even be in the helicopter that took the bodies to Ulan-Ude, the capital of Buryatia, where autopsies are performed. The official cause of death? Hypothermia. All 6 died from hypothermia. But does that make any sense? Not really. Not when you hear the details. Not when you read Valentina's own words. Not when you realize that 5 years after the tragedy, a well-known Buryat journalist and experienced traveler, Vladimir Yarov, decided to hike the exact same route to figure out what could have happened. And here is what he said. We are dealing with a whole chain of tragic circumstances. Most importantly, bad weather. August 1993 was very rainy. Later, Kazakh athletes visited the place of death, and at first they couldn't believe it. It's the height of summer, over 80 degrees outside, and people are freezing to death here. But that is most likely what happened. Imagine cold rain pouring down day and night, clothes and tents wet. Lighting a fire on Hamar Daban is difficult even in normal weather because everything is damp. And here it was raining for days. Naturally, by August 5th, the team was exhausted and cold. But here is where it gets even stranger. Yarov discovered that an area where you could safely spend the night, even light a fire, was only a 30-minute hike from where Korovina's group decided to camp. So why didn't they go there? Maybe the maps were inaccurate. Maybe they were too exhausted to search. Maybe Korovina couldn't navigate properly as twilight fell. Or maybe she simply felt sorry for her students and wanted to let them rest. In the morning, she noticed snow had fallen. As an experienced hiker, she knew how dangerous that was for tired, freezing people, so she told them to pack up and climb down to where there were trees. They rolled up their tents, gathered their things, and started to descend. And then, Alexander Kristin suddenly fell and died. A strange, horrifying death. Foaming at the mouth. Bleeding. The strongest person in the group, dead in seconds. What would you do? What would any leader do? Korovina stayed with him. She told the rest to continue down. But then something made them come back up. Because when the rescuers found the bodies, they were all in the same spot, not spread out along the descent route. They must have gone back up. Why? What could possibly make a group of terrified, exhausted hikers return to the place where they just watched their friend die? Valentina, the only survivor, moved to another city almost immediately after the incident. She started a new life. For over 20 years, she said nothing. Not even her own husband knew what she had lived through. Doctors helped her cope. She spent a long time in the hospital. But after many years, a journalist from the Russian newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda managed to contact her for an interview. And what she revealed is, I can't even find the right word. Haunting. Unbelievable. Terrifying. Let me read you parts of that conversation. The journalist asked, "How many times a day did you eat?" Valentina, "4 times a day at least. Hot food was a must. We would make a fire and cook. In addition, we would snack during rest stops. We had grains, powdered milk, crackers, canned meat, carrots, beets, onions, sweets, chocolate. I believe our food supply was based on a daily goal of 2,400 kilocalories per person." The journalist then asked about the camp stoves, because people said you couldn't cook much on those. But Valentina said, "I don't remember camp stoves. We went down into the forest and made fires." Then she defended Korovina. "This was my 3rd hike with her. She taught us art, technical drawing, and PE. I was studying to become an arts and crafts teacher and a school hiking instructor, which is why I ended up in her club. Some say Korovina is to blame for the death of the group. No way. It was early in the morning. We were asleep. It was very cold. Korovina woke us up, told us to pack our things and go down to the gorge. She was trying to save us, but it was too late. The wind was so strong that we had to crawl down instead of walking. Suddenly, Sasha fell and started frothing at the mouth. Korovina sat down next to him, hugged him, and that was it. She never got up again. Then everyone went mad. I don't know how long it lasted. It was like a horror movie. Everyone falling, bleeding and foaming at the mouth. Blood flowing from the nose. The journalist asked, "How did you escape?"
Valentina, Denis Shvashkin savait de me.
He kicked me and said, "Crawl down." I went down, but he didn't make it. I climbed into my sleeping bag and fell asleep, or not so much asleep as unconscious. I don't know. I woke up in the morning, went back up hoping that someone was alive. No, I saw that they all died. I went up to take a map and a compass. I also closed everyone's eyes. She was asked how she got out. She said, "I remember seeing power line poles and walking along them. It seems I hadn't gone completely mad, and it was as if someone was leading me all this time." The journalist asked who, intelligence agents? Secret forces? Valentina answered, "It was my guardian angel. I survived with God's help." She walked for 4 days. They died on August 5th, and on August 9th she was picked up by hikers. She remembered standing on the riverbank watching catamarans sail by. The tourists who found her later said she had washed herself and her clothes in the freezing river. She was probably in a state of severe shock. They had to give her calming drugs. And then she said something that might be the only real clue. The journalist asked, "What do you think they died of?" Valentina said, "Pulmonary edema. I think the symptoms fit: foaming and bleeding from the mouth, insanity." After that interview, Valentina participated in a popular Russian TV show together with Korovina's daughter, Natalia, and a rescuer named Yuri Golyas, who had been in charge of the search mission. And during that show, something shocking came out. Natalia, Korovina's own daughter, revealed that she was paid hush money. A lot of it. Shortly after the tragedy, she was summoned to some office and told not to ask any questions and not to investigate the death of her mother's group. They offered her money. She took it. She said she wasn't even allowed to see her mother's body. She wasn't permitted to be present at the corpse identification. All members of the group were buried in closed caskets. At first, she thought it was because she was only a child. But later, she learned that none of her relatives had seen Ludmila Korovina's body. So what is going on here? Let's talk about the theories. And there are many. The official story is simple. Sudden change in weather, hypothermia, just like Dyatlov Pass. The head of the Bureau of Forensic Medicine in Buryatia, Konstantin Yugov, said, "We received 6 bodies. Our task was to determine the cause of death. Could it be hypothermia, poisoning, injuries? The whole thing happened high in the mountains with low temperatures and heavy rain, plus physical exertion and oxygen deprivation. Under such conditions, death can occur quickly. There have been cases where people died of hypothermia within 2 hours. The autopsy revealed signs of hypothermia, pulmonary edema, and changes in the heart, liver, and lungs typical of this condition. That was the diagnosis. But wait, if they had plenty of food, why were they showing signs of starvation? Rescuers found food in their backpacks. So why didn't they eat? That's where the official theory starts to fall apart. Some people blamed Korovina. They said she pushed her team too hard, brought them to exhaustion and starvation. But the parents of the students, even after the tragedy, defended her. They said they trusted her completely. Not one of them believed she was to blame. Then there is the government conspiracy theory. Could a secret weapon have been tested in the area? What was that sticky fog that hikers described? And once again, we have similarities to Dyatlov Pass. Hikers fleeing their tents half-clothed, cutting their way out from the inside, clearly terrified of something. On Hamar Daban, the group left their tents half-dressed and fell into madness. Valentina's report says, Denis began to hide behind rocks and tried to run away. Tatiana banged her head against rocks. Victoria and Timur seemed to have gone mad. Korovina died of a heart attack. That is not hypothermia. That is something else entirely. And don't forget the hush money paid to Natalia, and the fact that Valentina herself stayed silent for 20 years. Another theory involves toxic gases. Up to 800 earthquakes are recorded annually in the Hamar Daban area. Many travelers have reported natural gases escaping from cracks in the earth. Natalia, Korovina's daughter, believes that gas played a key role in the group's death, although she hinted that it might have been some kind of man-made gas of unclear origin. Then there is the plant theory. The group was collecting a plant called rose root, also known as Rhodiola rosea. It is known for its miraculous properties. It can increase stamina, build resistance to stress and fatigue, and is used to treat asthenic and neurotic conditions. But could they have taken too much? Or could they have mistaken another poisonous herb for it? Valentina claimed they only used small quantities, having some with tea during lunch. But a whole bag of rose root was later found in Korovina's backpack. Some believe she was planning to sell it in the city. And here is where it gets spiritual, because local tradition says that the spirits of the forest, or even the mountains themselves, will punish anyone who gathers rose root in excess. Some say the group was punished for their greed and foul intentions. Spirits or not, nature on Hamar Daban is undeniably strange. The oddly behaving animals, the sticky fog, the feeling of being watched, the overwhelming despair that hikers have reported for decades. So what do you think? Was it simply hypothermia, exacerbated by exhaustion and bad weather? But then why did strong, healthy young people suddenly start foaming at the mouth and bleeding from the nose? Why did one girl bite another? Why did someone bash her own head against rocks? That is not cold. That is madness. Was it a secret military test? A gas leak? A poisonous plant? Or something even darker? Something that the Soviet and later Russian authorities wanted so badly to hide that they paid off a dead woman's daughter and pressured a traumatized 16-year-old girl into silence for 2 decades? We will probably never know the full truth. But here is what haunts me the most. Valentina Utachenko, the girl who closed the eyes of her dead friends, who crawled down a mountain in a blizzard, who walked 4 days through the wilderness following power lines. She said that as she was making her way out, she felt like someone was leading her. Not an intelligence agent, not a secret weapon, a guardian angel. And when she finally reached the river and saw the catamarans, she washed herself and her clothes in the icy water. She made flatbread for her rescuers on the lid of a cooking pot. She survived, but she spent the rest of her life not speaking about what happened up there. And when she finally did speak, her words only deepened the mystery. So here we are, decades later, with no definitive answer. The mountains of Hamar Daban keep their secrets. The sticky fog still appears from time to time. The deer still freeze and stare. And somewhere on that barren, wind-swept slope, 6 people lie in their closed caskets, their faces never seen by their own families. All because of a hike that should have been beautiful, a summer adventure, a chance to test their strength in the wild. Instead, it became a nightmare worse than Dyatlov Pass, because at least at Dyatlov, there were no survivors to tell the tale. Here we have a survivor, and her story is more terrifying than any silence could ever be. If you made it to the end, thank you for listening. Leave a comment, tell me which theory you think is the most plausible. Was it weather, poison gas, something supernatural, or a conspiracy? I really want to know what you think. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most disturbing mysteries. Stay safe, and maybe think twice before your next camping trip.